Welcome learners to the foundations of Heuatagogy. As by now we have gained an understanding of what is Heuatagogy. This Heuatagogy is rooted into the principles and practices of actually andragogy. As the name suggests, andra means adult. So Heuatagogy actually is an extended form of andragogy. The concept of Heuatagogy takes its bearing on self-determination, self-determined learning. The path of the learning is self-determined by the learner itself. So today's topic for discussion is what is pedagogy, andragogy and Heuatagogy. What is the difference between these three gogis or gogis? As most of us are familiar with the term pedagogy, isn't it? Peda signifies child. So the methodology of teaching learning for children is pedagogy. This is the basic understanding of the term pedagogy. Next comes the andragogy. As I have just now said that andra means adult and gogy is the ways and methods, methodology of teaching learning. So it is the teaching learning of adult learners. And lastly, the Heuatagogy. As we have gained an understanding on the concept, characteristics, nature and the significance of Heuatagogy, and also we know what is the scope, what is the wider range of Heuatagogy. So let us delve into the area of differences between these three methodology of teaching learning. The first one is the teaching of children. You can see teaching of children or dependent personalities. So a child is always dependent on parents or teachers, caregivers, whosoever is around, right? So it is the teaching of children who are considered to be dependent personalities. So while teaching a child who is dependent on someone, be it a teacher when he or she is in the classroom, in the school, or be it in the home when he or she is under the guidance and supervision of parents or caregivers. So that methodology is actually the teaching of children. Now we come to our second proposition, andragogy. Well, here is two terms. We are not talking about teaching. We are saying it is the facilitation learning for adults who are self-directed learners, isn't it? The adult learners. So whom can we call as an adult learner? Obviously we know in the Indian context, a girl who attains 18 years of age is considered to be adult, whereas a boy, his voter age is 21, but nevertheless 18 and above is considered to be the adult. So it is, we can call it is the teaching learning methodology of these adults who are into the higher education sector. So college, university goers are the adults. So for them we have some sorts of teaching learning methodology, right? So that teaching learning methodology in this contemporary world of education, we are actually replacing the term teaching with facilitation. That sounds more judicious because these adults are not that dependent. But you see, there are some people who are dependent for long. But then in general, we are talking about adults. They are not dependent. Rather, they are self-directed. They know where are they. Why are they supposed to be in the college, in the universities? So they have a purpose. So that is their self-direction. And teaching such kind of learners is obviously under the purview of andragogy. So andragogical methods deals with teaching of these self-directed learners. So now we can have a basic difference. We are aware of the basic difference between pedagogy and andragogy. Now we come to the Heuatagogy. As we have come across the concept of Heuatagogy, we have a little bit of idea. We know what is Heuatagogy. It is all pervasive, right? And so we define it, or we rather put it in the statement as it is the management of learning for self-managed learners. These self-managed learners are the lifelong learners. Definitely the adult learners. As I began my discussion, that Heuatagogy is an extension of extension of andragogy. So we are now dealing with adult learners who are self-directed, facilitating to make them self-managed, the way to learn by themselves, and they will choose how they will manage their learning. So here is a fine difference between andragogy and Heuatagogy. So Heuatagogy is dealing with adult learners, rather lifelong learners. It is dealing with facilitation, various types of facilitation techniques, tools, intervention strategies to manage these learners and to make them manage themselves. So this is the basic differences between pedagogy, which is way forward. I mean, it is much far from andragogy and Heuatagogy. So can we put it in this way, that the difference between pedagogy, andragogy and Heuatagogy has to do with the purposes and roles? Because we have actually defined the purposes and roles for the learners in these three domains. Because we are saying, in case of pedagogy, the institution and teacher decide what the student will learn and how they will learn it. Because we have already said they are dependent personalities. So the pedagogy, the methodology of teaching learning, the methodology of handling the learners will obviously depend on the institution and the teacher. That how will they make the children to learn? And of course, there are a number of strategies, methodologies, skills. Many intervention strategies are there. We know there are so many teaching methods that are applied in the primary, in the secondary, higher secondary learners. Now we come to andragogy. The teaching of adults, which can be pedagogical, Heuatagogical, or a blend of both. Look, in the Indian context, in higher education sector, often the institution and the teacher decides what a learner has to study or how will they learn to some extent. But with this pandemic and ICT boom, this conception is taking a different shape. Things are changing into pieces and scraps. Although we are deciding as a teacher in higher education institutions, and also we have to abide by some institutional policies, values and practices. But still we can have an independence of blending some principles of pedagogy. Here when we blend some aspects of pedagogy doesn't mean we will be treating children, but some strategies of teaching learning processes can be implemented in case of adult facilitation. We can directly go into managing their learning by making them self-managed learners, make them more determined. So it can be a blend. We can blend the aspects of pedagogy. We take some from andragogy and can Heuatagogy and can give facilitation lessons. We can carry out the teaching learning process in andragogy. Since we are talking about purposes and roles, now Heuatagogy. Here the student or the learner decides. Look, here is no enforcement, no imposition, but The learner or the student is deciding what to learn and how, and is supported by outside resources, including the teacher. So the learner needs extensive support. Sometimes not so extensive support, they need some support. This support may be resources, infrastructure, teachers, counselors. So Heuatagogy is something which is very much interdependent rather. Now we go to a table of content where we will have a summary of what is being deliberated till now. Pedagogy, andragogy, Heuatagogy compared. Since we have to keep ourselves very clear in conception, like how can we define or how can we make these three gogies different, although there are no watertight compartments, you see. Since all these three gogies talk about, they purports on the teaching learning methodology for the learners, right? So in case of dependence, we know, yes, how the learner is dependent in case of pedagogy. In andragogy, they are independent, and in case of Heuatagogy, they are interdependent. Interdependent on what? Various resources that can give them support, that can make them realize their determination. So a support is necessary, and of course interdependence of this support and the learners. When we talk about resources for learning, how resources are changed in case of pedagogy, andragogy and Heuatagogy. See, in pedagogy, since the institution, the teacher decides, so the resources becomes limited because it is in the hands of the institution or the learner. But in case of andragogy, it is a little more wider because the learner has his or her own experiences that can add up to the resources. And in case of Heuatagogy, yes, there is an onlooker, there is a teacher, facilitator, a support which can add up to the resources. And this add up may be amplified. How it can be amplified? Because the learner itself knows how to amplify, because he or she is determined, he or she is very purposeful, he or she knows how to carry out the work. For example, in this pandemic, we have come across so many resources, right? After doing online classes, giving online classes, some of us are teachers, some of us are still learners, because learning has no end. And Heuatagogy purports it's for the lifelong learning. So during this process, we have come across so many resources through different media, right? And we have managed. How can we use it in our learning? So this determination, this pathway of managing is what Heuatagogy is all about. Focus of learning. Obviously, for these three, the focus is different, as you can see. Motivation. Of course, the motivation for Heuatagogy comes from within. Self-motivation, self-efficacy is very important in order to give Heuatagogy a success. That is, if I am not self-motivated, if I do not possess a high self-efficacy, Heuatagogy is not possible. I mean, Heuatagogy cannot come into play. Similarly, the role of teacher, as it goes from left to right, the role of the teacher becomes very much minimum. Now, can we say it in this way, that a key attribute of andragogy is self-directed learning, defined by Knowles 1975 as a process in which individuals take the initiative with or without the help of others. How? In diagnosing their learning needs, formulating learning goals, identifying human and material resources for learning, choosing and implementing appropriate learning strategies, and evaluating learning outcomes. So, till now what we have discussed, this slide shows actually a systematic representation of the facts that are under the premise of andragogy. Since we are restricting, or we are just going into the two more important aspects of Heuatagogy, one the Heuatagogy itself and the andragogy. So now we take a look at the Heutagogical approach. To teaching and learning, it is The learners are highly autonomous and self-determined, and emphasis is placed on development of learner capacity and capability with regard or with a goal of producing learners who are well prepared for the complexities of today's workplace. Because we are talking about lifelong learning. It is not restricted to the classroom. It is not restricted to a particular course or a program. But it is throughout. Even if you are working, there also we need to learn. Every day is a new experience. Every day is a new learning. So this Heuatagogy actually takes us to this path and makes us more confident. So self-capacity, capabilities are very important here, and for this the support is required, the facilitation is required. The approach has been proposed as a theory for applying to emerging technologies in distance education and for guiding distance education practice and the ways in which distance educators develop and deliver instruction using newer technologies such as social media. As we know, in open and distance learning, social media has created a magic. And with this pandemic, which is no more a pandemic, it has taken a shape of epidemic, social media is creating a magic and a boom in giving us better opportunities, in giving us more fruitful outcomes in taking the learning from one stage to a higher stage. Now this slide shows the summary of what we have discussed right now. With 3 levels, as it is evident in this pyramid. The level 1 is pedagogy, level 2 is andragogy, and level 3 is Heuatagogy. As we can see, the teaching learning goes up from engagement, cultivation to realization.